Hi everyone. Today I'm going to recommend an incredibly exciting novel to you. The story's general is a contradictory figure. He is loyal to the king and ruthless, yet he is inadvertently touched by a girl. This girl has a mysterious background and possesses unknown powers, and her arrival disrupts the general's tranquility. Initially, their relationship is filled with hostility and distrust. The general is wary of the girl, while she is dissatisfied with his coldness and authority. However, as they face dangers and challenges together, they gradually discover each other's strengths and true emotions. The general's past hides astonishing secrets, and the girl's future may also be closely linked to destiny. Can they break down the barriers between them and find true love and their own path in this perilous world? Come and explore this wonderful journey filled with contradictions and contrasts with me. Chapter 7. My lady. I gazed up at the imposing figure before me, his golden eyes gleaming in the morning sunlight. General Terif, a stern and dutiful wolf-born, stood at the top of the boat's ramp, his intimidating presence impossible to ignore. My observant nature kicked in as I studied him, noting the way his muscles tensed beneath his uniform. "You are the general escorting us in the lower kingdom?" I asked, my diplomatic tone masking my wariness. Terif's face darkened as he rose to his full height, towering over me. I could see the flicker of insulting comments in his eyes, but he refrained from voicing them. "I will be escorting you through the lower kingdom. I care little for what your friends do," he stated, his voice as unyielding as his posture. I frowned at his statement, my mind already working on how to adapt to this new situation. Before I could respond, Lay approached our group, his protective instincts clearly on high alert. The distrust in his eyes was palpable as he regarded Terif. "Emrie, may I talk to you?" Lay asked, his tone betraying his discomfort with our new companion. I offered Lay a sheepish smile and nodded, moving down the ship's deck. As we walked, I could feel Terif's presence behind us, his loyalty to the king evident in his unwavering vigilance. Lay's temper flared, his easily angered nature coming to the fore. "Alone, General. I would like to speak with my charge alone," Lay demanded, his voice tight with frustration. Terif remained immobile, his golden eyes locked with Lay's. "No," he replied, his tone brooking no argument. I rolled my eyes, feeling caught between these two protective figures. "I have strict orders to not leave Lady Emrie's side," Terif added, his dedication to his duty clear. Lady Emrie, that was certainly a new title for me to possess. "Am her guardian. I won't hurt her," Lay protested, his voice tinged with disbelief and hurt. The mere presence of the king's general seemed to be an open insult to him, and I could sense the tension building between them. Terif's resolve remained unshaken. "I do not disobey my king," he stated firmly, his dark eyes devoid of emotion. Realizing that the standoff could continue indefinitely, I decided to intervene. I turned back to Lay, offering a reassuring smile. "It's okay, Lay. Just pretend 𝐊𝐲's not there," I said, ignoring the dark look Terif shot me. As I faced Lay, I saw the concern in his brown eyes and silently hoped that my diplomatic skills would be enough to navigate this delicate situation. "This is a private matter. Emre. I will wait until we have a moment in peace." He shot a pointed look at my new personal guard before flickering his gaze back to mine. My lips pulled into a small frown. What little freedom I was so looking forward to, I knew I could no longer have. The guards from the village were gone, only to be replaced by a wolf, born twice the size of any normal shifter man. I let out a small huff before forcing a soft smile on my lips. "All right. When will we be leaving?" "A minute or two. As soon as I tell the captain we are ready." I nodded and glanced over my shoulder at the king's general, but ever-present emotional's mask says firmly over his face. "Then I will be below deck in my room." "Is it the same as last year?" 𝐊𝐿𝐲 gave me a short nod, which I returned before heading for the hidden stairwell at the back of the ship. It was at least 2 weeks' voyage to the lower kingdom, and that was only if the sea was met with smooth waters and fast winds. I would not be surprised if we were sailing a little less than 2 weeks. I could already feel the depressed tug in my chest as I walked slowly below the ship's main deck, Terif following only a few steps behind. I always missed the mountain whenever we were away, missed the trees, the wind, the smell of freshly laid snow and rain. And now my heart ached for more than all the old reasons. Now it ached for him. I will take the room next to yours, my lady, Terif announced as I turned toward the door halfway down the ship's second level. There was 4 in total, the first being the upper deck. The second was traveler quarters. The third was for the ship's workers. And the fourth held the food and other storage needs. That's May's room, I argued and turned slightly wide eyes on the large wolf, Born. He raised a dark eyebrow at me. I don't care. This is where I will be staying. I could only blink up at him in surprise as he nudged open the small door with his large shoulder and chucked the bag slung across his other into the small room. I gaped over at him. How rude. Are all wolf borns that pig-headed? No, not the king. At least, I didn't think he was. Get settled while you can, Lady Emrie. I suspect this journey will be unpleasant for the both of us. Terif grumbled as he ducked low to step into the tiny room, his golden eyes flashing darkly in the dim light. I blinked at the spot he had disappeared from, even after he closed the door. Well, I'll wish. Well, lost he a joy. Maybe the king didn't care for my well-being at all. Maybe sending Terif to be at my side constantly was my punishment for disobey his direct command. Dear Lord, this was going to be a long journey. I let out a heavy sigh before stepping into the dimly lit room I usually occupied on these trips. It was the same as I remembered. A small room with a tiny cotton desk with a wash bowl on the side. My luggage rested at the end of the bed. And besides the flickering candle sitting beside the bowl, the only light in the room shone in through the small window above the cot. This was going to be the only place for freedom I was sure to get this entire voyage. How perfect. Amp, why did you not tell me you had been in contact with the king? 𝐿𝐼𝐺𝐻𝐿𝐼𝐻𝐿 voice was a hushed whisper as his brown eyes flickered over to the large general waiting in line behind the ship's crew for the end of the day meal. A disgruntled look stuck on his surprisingly handsome face. I smiled apologetically over at May's older brother as he leaned over his bowl, his dark eyes hard. It did not cross my mind. I answered softly as my fingers played absently with the small wooden spoon. His eyes flashed darkly, his grip on his own spoon tightening. It didn't cross your mind, he hissed as his temper flared. I dropped my eyes to the meek mushroom soup filling my bowl. I didn't have much of an appetite, especially since 𝐊𝐼𝐺𝐻𝐿 seemed rather mad at me. It didn't cross your mind to tell me that you've been in conversation with the King of the North. I could only shrug as his dark eyes stared holes into the top of my head. It honestly hadn't, but that was the only reason. My talks with the king, if you could call them that, were personal, sacred. It was like a deep, treasured secret I wanted to share with only him. They were special to me, regardless of what the king felt about them. They were the only times I had ever seen him, the only pieces of him I could hold close to my heart. Good Lord, and there goes my doubt that what he and the elders claim were true. I was never supposed to have had him, and my heart knew that, but it was betraying me now. It was clinging on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, I was supposed to have him, supposed to be his mate. I glanced over to the large, boulder-like sized wolf, Born just now getting his evening meal. He would be the only reminder of the king for weeks, for moons. I froze when Eric's eyes flickered up and locked with mine, their golden glow flashing what looked like a bright blue in the dim light of the 4th deck, before he blinked and they returned back to normal. My own widened before I swallowed and glanced away nervously. Did that? No, that wasn't possible. I'm sure it wasn't. For a moment there, I could have sworn I was looking into the eyes of the king. My chest ached painfully. Hello, are you even paying attention to me? I blinked up at a rather angry-looking 𝐊𝐼𝐺𝐻𝐿 before giving him an apologetic smile. Sorry, Lay. I'm not feeling so good. Do you mind if I go to bed a little early? I asked softly as he leaned back on the bench, his brown eyes flashing in the candlelight. He let out a heavy sigh before running his hand down his face. Yes, that's fine, Emrie. We will talk more tomorrow. I nodded and rose slowly to my feet as Terif finally reached the table, his golden eyes narrowing almost dangerously. Where are you going? He didn't even bother sitting down at the bench table with me and lay as I turned toward him. My brow furrowed. Back to my room. Am not feeling too well. The general frowned and his eyes dropped to the rather small bowl in his hands before he let out a heavy sigh. All right. He grumbled and set the untouched soup down on the table. Let's go. What? No, you need to eat. I stammered as his large body loomed close to mine. One of his dark eyebrows raised in question. I will eat tomorrow. Don't leave on my behalf. If you're hungry, please eat. I nodded towards the table where his untouched bowl sat and wrung my hands nervously in front of me. His gaze narrowed as those golden eyes flashed. If you leave, then I must as well. I opened my mouth to protest again, but he was already bending down and picking up the soup bowl before I could. I will eat this in my room if that will ease your mind. My lady. I gave him a soft smile and a nod before turning and heading for the stairs. I just wanted to be alone, honestly. To close my eyes and think about nothing in particular. But I knew that wouldn't happen. Every time my mind was occupied, it was filled with him. Images of his gorgeous face, soft lullabies of his unearthly voice, hauntings of those gorgeous eyes shining down at me brightly. Eyes I could have sworn were glancing over at me through those of Terif's. I let out a tired sigh. My mind truly was fabricating images of him. Anything to make me feel that he was somehow nearby. Sleep well, Lady Emrie. The general nodded down at me, his eyes soft for once as he opened the door to his room. And you, General. His lips twitched up in almost a smirk at that, his dark eyes flashing in the fading light as I slipped into my room and shut the door. I let out a heavy breath. Maybe, just maybe we could get along on this journey, Amp. The days at sea slowly lulled on, and the interactions between Terif and I were short and blunt at best. His attitude towards me always seemed to change between each conversation. During some he would be almost pleasant, while other he made no mistake to mask the distaste he felt for me. It sent my mind through more loops than I could count. All I could really do was just go with the flow and hope the next talk would be better than the last. May and I knew every corner of the ship, but for some reason, I always seemed to find something new in my boredom. The voyages to the lower kingdom used to always excite me, but with my large, and rather intimidating, new escort following me everywhere, it was uncomfortable. I was surprised on the 5th day of our journey to wake up and not find Terif waiting for me outside my door. He always seemed to be awake hours before I was, and waiting impatiently outside my room every morning. That was one certain thing about him I could count on. I knocked gently on the thin slab of wood separating his room from the hall, but received no reply. I frowned. It was like him to leave my side, or the close vicinity around me. A small smile quickly replaced the frown on my lips. Perhaps he was starting to loosen up, give me room to breathe. I found him leaning against the railing of the top deck, a small book in his large hands and his body casual as he thumbed through the pages. My lips quirked up at the sight. How odd. Reading seemed like such an underling pleasure. I was surprised to see the mighty wolf, born general, with a book. What are you reading? I asked the large male nonchalantly as I leaned beside him on the rail. His golden eyes flickered down at me in surprise before he snapped the book shut. I raised an eyebrow at the quick action. My lady, you are up early. He gave me a small bow, barely a tilt of his shoulders before he rose again. Looked like this conversation would be one of the pleasant ones. I couldn't sleep any longer. I was surprised you were not at my door, though, I admitted softly as I turned to look out on the beautiful blue view of the middle ocean. I was not expecting you to rise for another hour. His voice was a dark grumble as it filled the quiet morning air around us. My lips quirked up at the corner. What happened to not leaving my side? I teased as he turned to follow my gaze, the book held tightly in his hidden hand. What the king does not know can't hurt him or me for that matter. He added the last part as a dark rumble under his breath, but it pulled a quiet laugh from me nonetheless. If that is your mentality, then why bother following his orders at all? He shot me a shadowy glance with those gold eyes before flicking his gaze out to the water. He is my king. Disobeying for an hour is beyond disrespectful on its own. I would never disregard him completely. His voice was filled with such a strong passion that it pulled on the every constant ache in my chest. I wonder what kind of person the king was to receive such a loyal general and friend. I wrung my hands together as the image of those lightning blue eyes flashed through my mind. What is he like? The king, I mean. I asked softly as a small smile tried tugging on my lips at the mere mention of him. All I knew of Eirik were the rumors that circled around his being, and the 2 brief interactions between us. And yet, I felt like a giddy schoolgirl at the simple thought of those gorgeous lightning blue eyes. He is a great king, a great man, Terif answered without hesitation, the pride evident in his voice. He cares for his people and would sacrifice everything to ensure their safety. My smile slowly fell. Everything, I muttered softly, my eyes glancing out at the crashing waves in the distance. What exactly did everything entitle? The villages he was supposed to rule, those under the mountain me. The thought caused a painful ache in my chest, one I tried to shove away. I would not be surprised if he were to sacrifice me to save his people, the wolf-borns, mate or not. I was just a girl, just some stupid, silly girl he barely knew, or cared for, so it would seem. I didn't know him. I can't imagine it would be very hard to choose between that and his people. I could feel Terry's dark eyes gazing curiously over at me. Does he care for the people that he does not consider his? I asked softly as the large ship moved with the steady waves, the ones at the base of the mountain. A hard mask overtaking his handsome features. He cares for the mountain, and protects the shifter villages under it to ensure the safety of his kingdom. But we are a part of his kingdom. You are not wolves, and some of you aren't even shifters. I flinched at his words, at the harsh bite in his tone as he shot me a pointed look. I guess the pleasantries were over. You should be eternally grateful that he even allows you to live below the mountain. His golden eyes were dark in distaste, his words like a sharp knife as they cut through the ocean air. Do all wolf-borns share your hatred? I muttered as he turned away from me, his dark eyes like icy daggers on my skin. He scoffed. It is not hatred. It is annoyance. You and the other underlings prance around his kingdom like you belong there. Like you own it when it is by his kindness that you are even allowed to live there. 𝐊𝐿𝐻. It's not even a kindness. He let out a harsh bark of laughter that made me edge easily away from him. This whole conversation was rather frightening. Honestly, if the mountain were to be attacked, the underlings would be hit first and give us time to respond. You are all a safety precaution to ensure the well-being of our lives. I turned on my heels to hurry away from him, unwanted tears filling my eyes. How horrible this beast was. Did he have no care for how this would make me feel? Of course he didn't. Why would he? I was just a disgrace to him and his people. To his king. I was even a shifter. He probably didn't even believe I was truly the king's mate. Hell, I wasn't even believing it anymore. Wait. My lady. His voice was rimming with distaste as it forced my hurried retreat to stop. I turned on him with angry eyes. What could you possibly say to make this any worse? I snapped at the general who was walking over to me with twisted amusement flickering behind his gold eyes. Their bright taunting only reminded me of the gold, power, and how it would kill me to get to the king. The king wanted me to give you this. His voice was hard as he thrusted that book he was looking at early out in the air between us. His eyes glowed in loathing. I reached out with a trembling hand and gingerly took it from his large hands. There was only a gold-encrusted symbol on the cover, one of a wolf howling. I ran my fingers over it gently. He expects you to read it, but do not repeat what you learn to anyone besides a wolf, or you will suffer the consequences. There was no mistaking the warning in his voice, or the dark promise in his eyes before he turned and stalked over to the doors leading below deck. I held the book tightly in my trembling hands. I didn't even want to look at the thing, much less touch it. I didn't want to think about what was so important between the pages that would cause such dire consequences to fall over me. And after that fun little conversation with his general, I wouldn't put it past the king to carry them out himself. Perhaps I was wrong about him not being capable of hurting me, of killing me. I walked over to the ship's edge, ready to throw the disastrous reading material into the dark. Deep water, but paused. This book could hold all the information of the Wolf-borns that I ever wanted to know. Their ceremonies, their customs, their king. I brought the book closer to my chest and ran my fingers over the gold symbol again. Perhaps it would be more than just the history of his people. Maybe it would be the history of him. I turned from the railing and walked slowly back to the staircase leading to the guest chambers. The book clutched tightly to my chest, whether or not what Terif said was true. That didn't stop me from wanting to learn more about the King of the North and his people. I spent my days just dreaming about their history long before I even dared sneak into his territory. I did not know what us underlings did to warrant such distaste from Terif, or what I did for him to act so cold, but I would not let that dampen my need to learn. Or those two small sacred memories I held of the king and I. I let out a soft sigh as I opened the door to my room and slipped back inside. I would just spend the day reading the odd little book, and reassuring myself I would not tell anyone. I did not know what the consequences were that the general spoke of, but I did know that I didn't want to find out anytime soon. Chapter 8. I hadn't realized how many hours slipped by until the sky outside my little window started to darken. I was right about the little book Terif had given me. It was filled with the customs and traditions of the Wolf-borns, of their origins, and their myth. How they believed that the very first Northern king was a reincarnation of their god 𝐿𝐻𝐻𝐿, their god of the night and everything that entails. And every king after held a part of 𝐿𝐻𝐻𝐿's soul. It was fascinating, beyond fascinating. I had spent hours reading, and I wasn't even halfway through the book. There was still so much more to learn. My only regret was that Eirik wasn't teaching me himself. I jumped in surprise at the soft knock that sounded on my door, and glanced at my little window to see that the sun had fallen behind the dark water. I had spoken to 𝐊𝐿𝐻𝐻 earlier in the day, and May had already told me she was turning in for the night. Terif was the only other one who really had any need to come see me, but after our lovely conversation that morning, I doubted he wanted to see me anytime soon. Who is it? My voice didn't hide how startled I was, and I pushed my closed fist against my chest to help slow my rapidly pounding heart. Lady Emrie. Oh great. It was the overbearing Wolf-born. 𝐻𝐻 come back to taunt me even more. I would like to talk to you, if you have a moment. I let out a sigh and gently closed the book before walking over to the door. I opened it just a crack. What do you want? I didn't bother to hide the discomfort in my voice, or the glare in my eye. It's not like he wasn't expecting anything different. Terif was standing just outside my small room, an apologetic flicker lighting his dark eyes. The King of the North's general was so large in the small decks of the ship that he had to crouch a few inches so his head wouldn't brush the top of the ceiling. I raised a questioning eyebrow at him. To apologize. My lady, I spoke out of place this morning, and upset you. I'm sorry. I blinked up in surprise at the large wolf, born as he stood hunched awkwardly in front of my door, a rather sheepish smile pulling at his handsome face. I crossed my arms over my chest and raised an eyebrow at him. 𝐻𝐻's been rude to me before this morning, but never before had he come to apologize. What made now any different? You've never really cared before. I muttered as he reached up and ran a heavy hand through his hair, his golden eyes flashing in the little light of the hallway. I know, but 𝐿𝐻𝐻 seemed to really upset you this time, and I am sorry for that. His gaze and soft smile seemed sincere enough, so I let my arms fall slowly back to my sides and eased my tense features. It's okay, I mumbled as his eyes flickered hopefully. His shoulders instantly sagged in relief as he let out a soft sigh. I felt a frown pull at my lips. I see you started reading already. He nodded towards the book waiting patiently for me at the desk. My frown eased into a small smile. Yes, it's very fascinating, he muttered softly as his eyes flickered back out to the dimly lit hallway. Indeed, it is. Have a good night, Lady Emrie. And with one last bow he disappeared into the room next to mine. I stood silently in my door for a moment after, staring wide-eyed at the spot he was just in. What an odd man. I retreated back into my room and closed the door behind me. I had a lot more reading to do. My lady. Terif bowed as he held his hand out for me at the base of the platform. I gave him a grateful smile and nodded as he helped me down from the boat's ramp and out onto the bustling street. Boo, I muttered already as I raised my hand to fan the heat away from my face. I had just barely set foot in the lower kingdom and I was already becoming overheated. And it didn't help that Terif's large, intimidating figure practically hovered over me the entire time. The crew is taking our luggage to the inn. Would you two like to look around for a while? 𝐊𝐿𝐼𝐻 asked May and I with a huff as he jumped down from the ramp and flashed us a bright smile. Sure. That sounds like fun. No. I will have to scout the town before Lady Emrie goes anywhere. Terif's gruff voice instantly washed over mine like I hadn't spoken at all. I turned wide. The wilder dies on the wolf, born and gaped up at him. I can assure you. General, I have never had a problem in the lower kingdom before. That was before you were important. His golden eyes flashed and I took a small step back as he snarled, wow. I seriously hoped not all wolves were as bipolar as him. I let out an aggravated sigh and rubbed my palm against my forehead as 𝐿𝐼𝐻's eyes narrowed. I wouldn't let her, or my sister, wander off on their own if I thought there would be any danger. I don't care what you think. My orders are to protect Lady Emrie, and I will do that in every way I know possible. Terif's voice wasped a snarl, or even angry, just firm. He found 𝐊𝐼𝐻 rather ridiculous and he wasn't going to waver his stout loyalty to the king by disobeying his orders anytime soon. It's all right, Lay, I said softly when I saw the furious red creep quickly onto his face. HS just doing his job. I didn't miss how the general's eyes widened, or the surprised look he shot me before it quickly disappeared behind that emotional's mask once again. I'm sure he was expecting me to fight him on this, but the last thing I needed was for him to ruin the little excitement over this trip that I had left. Which was a lot. Granted, but still. That's not the point. He keeps demeaning my authority and your authority. Terif suddenly growled, his golden eyes flashing dangerously as he took a heated step towards my angry town leader. 𝐿𝐼𝐻's eyes widened. But he didn't back down. Even though the wolf, born, was twice the size of any normal man, and him, the only authority you have is what those half-brained underlings think you possess. You should be on your hands and knees thanking me for allowing you to speak at all. Enough. I suddenly snapped and placed a firm hand on the large general's chest as he bristled and took a threatening step beside me. His whole body froze, and his golden eyes shot down to my touch. But I refused to move away as I shot him and 𝐿𝐼𝐻 a dark look. We are supposed to be on a trip and enjoy ourselves. The last thing any one of us needs is a winter filled with arguing. So, please try to get along, or at least be civilized. I exclaimed and glared pointedly at 𝐿𝐼𝐻 as his dark eyes flickered angrily. Sure, Terif had a problem with being, well, soulless. But if 𝐿𝐼𝐻 didn't tag him on like always, they would hardly ever talk. May's older brother clenched his jaw shut before his dark eyes glanced down and gave a small nod. Fine, but keep him away from me for a while. He practically growled before turning on his heel and stalking down the busy street. I let out a small sigh as I turned to the large wolf simpering behind me with a raised eyebrow. My hand was still resting flat against his hard chest, but he didn't seem to notice anymore or care, as his golden eyes glared daggers down at me. And you? Can I trust you to behave? His gaze flickered, and his teeth clenched, but he gave me a silent nod before stepping away from my hand. I shook my head and turned to look at a wide-eyed, waiting May, who had just been standing behind me the entire time, but Terif's voice pulled me to a stop. If you wish to walk around for a while, I will follow you. My gaze widened and I snapped my eyes to his emotionless face as he ran that heavy hand through his hair. His eyes never left the busy street or the crowd he towered over. That would. I paused and licked my bottom lip as May suddenly clutched at my arm. I raised an eyebrow as she viciously nodded and stared up at the general with wide, adoring eyes. I let out a short breath of air. That would be perfect. Thank you. The wolf, born only nodded before resting his hands casually in his pants pocket. Is so handsome. May gushed not 5 minutes later as we walked around the bustling stands and the heavy crowd. Terif was following closely behind us, but kept a few empty feet between. The street was too packed to give anyone much room, but the few who tried to squeeze between our little group earned a swift growl and hard shove out of the way from our lovely guard. There was a blush staining her pale cheeks and she kept glancing over her shoulder shyly every few seconds. I shook my head. Don't bother. May, I don't think he has a nice bone in his body. I muttered softly as we glanced through all the pretty necklaces hanging from a string on one of the stands. I'm sure that's not true, she argued before glancing over her shoulder once again. The large general was leaning heavily against the wall a few feet from us, his golden eyes hard as they constantly scanned the crowded street. Every once in a while, they would flicker over to May and I before scanning the crowd once again. He showed little interest other than following us around and keeping me safe. I didn't want me to get our hopes up over some wolf that cowled and even hold a polite conversation. She was an underling after all, and a shifter besides the great wolf Borns. I feared he would be far ruder towards her than he was with me, and if that booked her if had given me was anything to go by. Mates given to them by the heavens was one of the most important aspects to their culture. I doubted they were up for little, temporary, romantic flings, especially with those they didn't even consider residents of the mountain. Are you ready, Lady Emrie? I jumped in surprise as Terif's voice suddenly appeared in my ear, and I blinked up at him as he stood hovering over my small frame. I hadn't even felt him approach. May's eyes wide and she let out a small gasp as her gaze watched the large male looming over me. Ready for what? I stammered as his golden eyes flashed. For such a big man. He moved quietly for my liking, to head to the inn. It's still early. It was hard to keep my voice from a mumble as I dropped my gaze back to the jewelry. He was just so intimidating. It honestly made my skin want to crawl. May's hands clutched tightly onto my arm. We've been out long enough. Tomorrow is another day. I licked my lips at his words. His tone wasn't harsh, or angry, or even really demanding. It was reasonable, reasonable, like he didn't want to really start an argument. I let out a small sigh and blinked my eyes over at May. You wouldn't mind heading in for the night, would you? We can venture out early tomorrow. She was nodding her head before I even finished speaking, her eyes still focused on the giant general looming at my side. Not at all. I'm getting kind of hungry anyway. She shot me a small smile before blinking bashfully up at Terif. I wanted to tell her not to even bother. I didn't want her feelings growing and then torn apart when he shot hateful words at her. He wouldn't care either way. Terif only grunted before gripping onto my elbow and steering me in the direction he wanted me to go. May stumbled hurriedly after us. You can slow down. You know, it's not like we're in a hurry. I grumbled as he ushered me past the busy bodies and turned towards a vacant tally. How do you even know where we're staying? I asked on a sigh when I realized he was going to listen. I can smell that child who calls himself a leader anywhere. He practically growled as he pulled me through the streets just outside the busy crowd. May followed silently behind us. I frowned, but didn't bother commenting. I didn't need any more of those lovely talks between us for a while, or the rest of the day at least. The king assigned him to escort me through the lower kingdom, and although I didn't seem all that sure in what Eirik really thought of me, he must have trusted Terif. I would have to trust him. Although, honestly, who would possibly want to hurt me? No one even knew I was the king of the North's supposed mate. I had to shake my head of all thoughts revolving around him, and try to focus on what was going on around me. I already didn't want to be there. I wanted to be on the mountain, sitting in my chair, and daydreaming about what a life with the king would be like. I let out an internal groan and actually shook my head. Not thinking about him was going to be harder than I thought. I screeched when my foot suddenly slipped into an unseen hole in the stone walkway and my ankle twisted painfully. I stumbled right out of Terif's soft grip and fell to the ground with a cry as my poor foot throbbed. The large general stopped his hurried steps and turned towards me with a raised eyebrow before he let out a dark chuckle. "Are you all right, my lady?" His voice was a mocking tease, one I shot an angry glare at before turning back to my hurt foot. "I'm fine." I snapped at him as May dropped to my side and lifted the end of my dress gently. "You're such a klutz, Anne," she teased softly, but a giggle slipped past her lips as she gazed down at my throbbing ankle. "Thanks for the help." I grumbled at her and shooed her away with my hand before looking down at my quickly swelling foot. "Just perfect. Are you all right?" Terif's voice was softer, more somber that time as his large form slowly crouched down behind me. My teeth clenched. The arrogant general had just been laughing at me, like he even actually cared. "I already told you." "I'm fine." I turned my head to shoot him another glare, but my words caught in my throat. Blue eyes, so bright they shone like clashing lightning as they gazed down at me in concern. I could only blink up at him like a gaping moron as that concerned gaze turned worried. "Emrie, are you all right?" It was still Terif's voice, but the soft, almost caring tone in it threw me for a loop, especially with Erika's eyes shining down at me. "North." My lips moved on their own as my hand reached slowly for his face, my fingers rubbing gently just under the skin of his eyes. How was this happening? His blue eyes flashed and a small smile pulled at the wolf's face as he gave me a soft chuckle. "I thought you weren't going to call me that," he teased gently, amusement dancing across those lightning eyes. I cowed and helped the blush that rose to my cheeks, but like all other times I saw him, my eyes never wavered from his. "You don't want me calling you by the other name." My words came out slow, like I wasn't exactly sure what I was trying to say. My mind just could not get over what was happening. The king's eyes and Terif's body, the king's almost sweet tone rolling of his general's vicious tongue. It was making my head spin. His small smile turned sad as Terif's large hand reached up and played gently with a strand of my hair, just like the king had done before we left. His eyes finally flickered from mine and glanced down at my bruised ankle, his smile turning into a frown. "You are hurt," he murmured softly, and before I realized what he was doing, the general's large arms reached out and scooped me right off the ground. I let out a surprised squeak as he rose to his feet and cradled me gently to his chest. "How is this possible?" I stammered softly as he turned back around and began carrying me down the vacant street. Silent, bewildered May following behind us once again. I tried to shoot her wide and rather terrified eyes, an apologetic smile, but my gaze was already flickering back up to the king's gorgeous blues before I could. He gave me another small smile before Terif's arms cradled me tighter to him. "You are hurt, little Emrie. We will talk when I see you again. When will that be?" I asked quickly as his blue eyes seemed to flicker. His smile fell, and his jaw set in a hard clench as that gaze darkened. He was leaving. He was giving Terif back his body, or whatever he had done to be there in the first place. I am not sure. His voice was soft, but distant as his eyes flashed gold before flickering back to blue. "It takes a lot of energy to do this, but I will check it on you soon." I didn't even get a chance to say goodbye as Terif's body suddenly stalled, and his large form lurched to a stop as his eyes flashed and turned to that dark gold once again. My heat dropped in my chest by. I was never going to get over how my chest ticked painfully whenever he disappeared. It was so weird. My eyes shot up to Terif as let out a dark growl and shook his head, but didn't drop his arms from around me. Terif dawned. He snarled and didn't spare me a glance as he started walking again, his hard shoulders stiff as he carried me angrily down the street. "But what was that?" I said, daunted. He snapped and shot that dark glare at me. I flinched in his hold. "The last thing I fucking need is your voice right now." Well, okay then. I didn't say anything else as he stormed angrily through deserted streets and straight to the inn at the center of the city we were apparently staying at. I felt bad for poor May. If it wasn't for his abnormally large form standing taller than almost everything, we would have lost her. Oh God. Emrie. What happened? 𝐊𝐿𝐼𝐻 demanded the minute we walked into the tavern. He had been sitting at one of the middle wooden tables, surrounded by the few guards the elders hired each year we visited. I shot him a small smile, but didn't get a chance to answer before Terif was carrying me angrily up the rickety wooden steps by the tavern's counter. "May can tell you," was all I was able to say before we disappeared upstairs. "You know, you don't have to be so rude all the time," I snapped when the large wolf, Born suddenly shoved open the fourth door down and stomped in. He ignored me before literally tossed me like a rag doll onto the dingy little cot at the back of the room. He didn't say anything as he turned for the door again. "I didn't want you here any more than you did," I shouted after him, but he barely paused before slamming the door shut behind him. "Ugh." I let out a loud shout of annoyance as my heavy body plopped back against the cot. He was so mean. The king was definitely not as hostile and rude as him. Maybe those cruel and vicious rumors were about that ignorant general instead. I rubbed my hands down my face with a heavy sigh as the images of bright blue eyes flashed through my mind. The king of the north, Eirik. He had taken over Terif's body somehow. Had carried me for as long as he seemed he could. He was here. For a moment. A brief moment. He was here. My heart wanted to soar at the memory. I glanced around the dark, tiny room and took in the run-down, shabby furniture that just sat plainly against the walls. The few bags of luggage I had packed sat against the foot of the bed, and I gave a small frown at the sight. How in the world did he know this was my room? I gasped and nearly shot from the bed when the door slammed open. Terif stormed back in, a small goat skin bag clutched tightly in his hands. "What are you doing?" I stammered, and tried to edge away from him nervously, but the sharp pain in my ankle reminded me of how immobile I was at that moment. My eyes widened when he suddenly reached down and lifted my sore ankle into the air, his golden eyes hard as he glared holes down at my foot. "Wait," I started to exclaim, but instantly froze when he pressed that bag gently to my swollen injury. The bag was cold, but it instantly soothed the throbbing pain in my ankle. I let out a relieved sigh and let my back rest slowly against the surprisingly soft mattress. "Thank you," I mumbled softly as a wave of sleepy washed over me. The sun had set a few minutes before, and my mind had been going full throttle ever since I got off the ship. I needed sleep. "Go to sleep," Terif's dark voice growled, and despite the harsh undertone, I found my eyelids falling heavily. I was lying awkwardly sideways on the bed with my foot held slightly in the air as he alternated the cold pack slowly around the swollen bone. My eyes had finally closed, and I just started to drift off to sleep when the cold of the bag disappeared. I wanted to pout and demand he place the bag back, but I was too tired to really care at the moment. And I was definitely too tired to pay much attention to the pair of large arms gently scooping under me and lifting me to the normal position on the bed. I let out a small groan's H. The soft voice was enough to make my mind slowly ease off to sleep once again. But not before I felt him readjusted my ankle and placed the cold bag back on the throbbing pain. "Sleep well, Lady Emrie. Chapter 9 Take them from her." The king's voice washed over me like a warm blanket as I blinked up at the white haze of my mind. That soft whisper made my lips want to pull into a large, ecstatic smile, but my body wouldn't let me. I was too heavy, too sleepy. A dream. He was here in a dream, smiling down at me, rubbing his strong hand gently over my hair, his blue eyes glowing like lightning. He was so beautiful. "My lord, I do not think this isn't up for discussion." There was a hard bite to Eirik's tone, but the face in my dream remained soft as he gazed down at me. His full lips pulled in a gentle smile. It made warmth flood my stomach. "Take them from her. I don't want her knowing more than she needs to just yet." His smile slowly saddened, but he leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead anyway. It made me want to giggle in elated happiness. I don't believe that is fair to her. North. Terry's voice was soft for once, but I cowled and see his grumpy face in my dream. It made me frown. 𝐿𝐲 Terif was not something I wanted to miss out on. It's for her protection. I care little if it is fair. A dark growl filled my ears. Then dream, me blinked, and Eirik disappeared. My heart dropped painfully to my stomach. Why did he always leave? Why would he never take me with him? I laid staring at the white haze of my mind's eye for a few silent seconds before I felt a heavy weight lean slowly beside me. Forgive me, Lady Emrie. This is not my choice. I wanted to frown at Terry's words, to wonder why his tone sounded so remorseful, but something cool touched my forehead and that white haze turned black before I could. My dream slowly faded away. Lady Emrie. I raised my head and blinked over at the large general standing uneasily in my open doorway. I gave him a soft smile. General, is everything all right? His golden eyes were dark in what I would have sworn was concern, but they flashed and his face fell into that emotional 𝐊𝐲𝐬𝐻𝐿 mask once again. I've just come to see how you are feeling. My smile widened and I played gently with the end of the yellowed page as he leaned against the wooden door frame. It had been almost a week since my little fall, and my ankle was 10 times better than I expected it to be. A lot better.
Thank you.
Again, for carrying me back to the inn. He only gave me a curt nod as he crossed his large arms over his chest and glanced around the small room. The king wanted me to answer any questions you have regarding that. He practically grumbled as he nodded towards the book under my fingertips. My eyes flickered back over the old, fascinating writing as I shook my head. No, thank you. It's pretty self-explanatory, was all he muttered before leaning off the door and turning around. That little underling of yours wants to go back to the market. If you are feeling well enough to join her, I will be waiting downstairs. He didn't bother waiting for my answer before he walked across the hall and down the stairs. I let out a sigh and tried not to roll my eyes, just as I thought we were going to have a civil conversation. He leaves. How typical. I closed the book and pushed my chair out before slowly rolling my ankle. It felt better than the other day. A lot better, and despite it all ache if I lay on it, I felt perfectly fine. Perhaps going for a walk around the lower kingdom with May wouldn't be bad. I was able to go the morning after like I had promised her. My foot hurt too much to even stand on. But she understood, and assured me she didn't mind. Her and 𝐊𝐿𝐲𝐻𝐿 had been wandering around and enjoying their vacation while I sat in my little room, reading my book, and wondering if Terif was always so brutish the entire week. I let out a sigh before closing my little history book and reaching into my trunk for my purse, if you could even call it history. It was full of myths and legends, rumors that all revolved around the wolf, born 𝐿𝐲𝐻𝐿, and how he practically created the North. They probably weren't even true, but I enjoyed reading and nonetheless. I could use a break from the cramped, dusty, old room after all. The entertaining area of the tavern was packed as I descended the stairs and met a brooding Terif at the bottom. He was leaning heavily against the wall. His large arms crossed over his chest as those golden eyes flickered uneasily around the room. He was a big fan of crowds, or at least crowds of underlings. May was laughing with her older brother and a few of their guards near the entrance of the inn. I felt a smile pull at my lips as I walked over to her. At least she was still having a good time. Terif followed closely behind me, like usual, and didn't bother trying to be polite to the people crowding the little tavern as he pushed them out of the way, even though most of them instantly scurried at the mere sight of the massive wolf born. I could hear their whispers on the street and in the inn about the general, about how large and abnormal he was. I almost all instantly recognized him as a wolf from the mountain, as a soldier that came to the lower kingdom along with his kin. He snarled behind me, which I chose to ignore. Emmy, how is your ankle? May asked as soon as I stepped beside her and lay, both siblings gazing over at me happily. I shot them both a smile, despite the nickname. Much better. Am ready to walk around the market if you still want to. Of course. May cheered happily before looping her arm through mine. Her bright, hazel eyes glancing quickly over to Terif before back again. I let out an internal sigh. I guess her little infatuation hadn't headed like I hoped. He would crush her poor heart under his heavy boot. I know you have your bodyguard, 𝐊𝐿𝐼𝐻 grumbled distastefully as he shot a glare at the general, who simply returned the gesture. But be careful. They'll be meeting a few merchants and shopkeepers all day. I gave him a reassuring smile and May kissed his cheek before he disappeared out the door of the tavern. Terif grumbled something under his breath that I chose to ignore. We've barely been here a weekend, I already spent half of my money. May sighed dejectedly as we walked out onto the bustling street and wandered towards the center of the lower kingdom. I called and hid my snicker. You never were good with spending. She let out an exasperated sigh at my side. You'll just have to convince 𝐊𝐼𝐻𝐬 to give me some more. There's just too many pretty things in the world to buy. Terif stayed silent close behind us as I let out another laugh, but I could practically feel him rolling his eyes at my friend. We stayed out in the center of the city for the majority of the day, stopping only a few times to eat at a tavern or feed the little fish that would gape up at us from one of the many man-made ponds. The always brooding general just followed quietly behind us the entire time. I wanted to say it was a relief from his constant degrading demeanor, but I was actually hoping for more of a verbal interaction with him. He knew a lot about the king, information I desperately wanted to know. I had been dreaming about him more and more lately, about the craziest things. At one point, I had even dreamt he could possess another's body and act through them. Maybe it was the mystery that surrounded him, or maybe it was just my imagination trying to make up for something that was there. It was all very tiring. It is getting late. My lady, night will be falling soon. It's time to head back. Terif's deep voice was suddenly rumbling in my ear, his large body like a warm furnace at my back. Like usual, I jumped in surprise. I will never get over how quiet he was, especially for his size. He was looming over me, his hard chest just barely a few inches from my back. I nodded as his golden gaze washed over mine, just daring me to go against him. Honestly, I was getting very tired. My ankle was starting to throb again, and I just wanted to curl up on my bed with a candle and the book the king wanted me to read. Besides, Terif, it was the only thing I had to remind me I ever actually met him. But he has a meaning now in my life. But it's so early, and the night life here is amazing. Lady Emrie is tired, and she does not need to be out after the sun has fallen. Terif's voice wasn't exactly harsh when he cut me off, but it wasn't pleasant either. It made me want to roll my eyes, but instead I just let out a sigh at the dejected look that crossed my friend's face. You don't have to snap at her, I grumbled as Terif took the bags from my hand and began ushering me in the direction of the inn. She didn't do anything. He made a sound in the back of his throat that was close to a snore as he began directing me through the crowd, May following slowly behind us. We had had so much fun today, and then one curt statement from the large wolf born had made her seem so crestfallen. I wasn't going to let him ruin her vacation anymore after this, or hurt her feelings more than he already had. She is ignorant, like her brother, and neither of them learn. He growled down at me as his large arms pushed the crowd out of the way, or the ones that weren't automatically shuddering at the scowl plastered on his face. No, you're just too hard on them. They enjoy having a good time, unlike some people. I grumbled the last part under my breath, but I'm sure he heard. He never seemed to miss anything. He let out a dark growl, one that reverberated deep in his chest and shook straight through my skin. I gasped. You can't expect anyone to have a good time when they're forced to babysit an underling her half-brain friends. My mouth snapped shut after that, and I let out an irritated huff before turning my attention completely away. He was the most bipolar, agonizingly rude individual I had ever met. Every time I thought we were making progress, he would just throw another insult into the air. What was wrong with him? I turned on him with my fists clenched at my sides and a hard glare plastered on my face. He stopped ushering us through the crowd and raised a dark eyebrow at me in question as I scowled at him. Got something to say? My lady. His lips were curling at the corners in an arrogant smirk, his dark eyes flashing taunting lie in the setting sun. My temper flared. You. I wanted to shout at him, to yell about how rude he was, and how all his crude words and statements were uncalled for, but my voice fell flat on my tongue. I wouldn't lower myself to his level, or cause a scene in such a large mass of people. I had more manners than that. I tore my furious gaze from his and forced my clenched fists to relax before I wrapped my arm around a silent maze. "Let's go," I grumbled before urging her along with me, not caring whether or not that pompous wolf followed. Although I'm sure he was. He would never disobey his king. I heard his quiet chuckle over the bustling crowd, but paid him no further attention as I led the way back to the inn. I had no idea how the king put up with him, or even let him be his third in command. The man was insufferable. We were barely a few streets from the tavern when something drastic happened, and of course, it would be the very thing that proved Terif right on almost all accounts. The majority of the lower kingdom was a safe place. People generally kept to themselves, and the monarch provided them with what they needed to live, but like most bustling cities, there were still those who would steal, plunder, and mug if they deemed necessary, and there was no easier target than to helpless females with one male escort. If that male was a general to the Northern Wolf-born king. 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐝 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐬𝐩𝐿 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐝 enforced to code of a low-level witch. Terif's voice suddenly sounded in the deserted street with a gruff urgency as his strong hand reached up to grip my upper arm. I flinched at the action, but his head was angled to the side and his golden eyes were flashing nearly black in the quickly rising darkness. "What's the matter with you?" I snapped as he tugged me not so gently to his side and let out a dark growl into the cool night air. "Something isn't right." His voice was flat, emotional as his gripped tight and on my arm, and he began dragging me down the deserted street. May hurried after us with wide, surprised eyes. "You can't just grab me like this, be quiet." His dark voice snarled as he suddenly jerked us to a stop. I gasped and staggered against his hard back at the loss of momentum. What in the devil was wrong with him? There was nothing wrong, something shot out in front of us. A dark mass that slid inhumanly in the darkness, before it disappeared down the side of a tall building. My breathing caught in my throat. "What in the world, fuck?" Terif growled as his large body took a protective stance in front of me, and Meg curled her fingers tightly into the back of my dress. "What's going on?" she whispered, her voice shaky in fear. I gulped and shook my head. I had no idea, but it had to be bad for the general to act the way he was. I resisted the urge to curl against the hard planes of his back and bury my face in his shirt out of fear. That wouldn't help anyone. This was the last thing I wanted to fucking do today. Terif growled as his large body began walking backwards, forcing May and I to do the same. I gripped tightly onto the ends of his shirt. "What's going on, Terif?" I murmured up at him with wide, frightened eyes, but he just let out another snarl as that dark mass appeared again. "We are close to the inn. If I tell you to run, you run. Do you understand?" His voice was still hard and emotional but I could sense the urgency hidden beneath it, and that was the only reason why I nodded and didn't push the subject. If he was worried, then something was very wrong. The dark mass littered into view again, but stopped halfway across the street. Terif let out a low, dark growl, one that frightened even me. "He's not going to be happy about this." I heard the general grumble under his breath as his strong arm reached behind him and pulled me closer against his back protectively. I didn't have to wonder long about who the he was. Something flashed in the corner of my eye and I heard May gasped. I said run out into the street behind us, and stood watching the three of us squish together. The unease in my stomach only grew. "Emrie." May's voice was a desperate plea as she clung tighter to the back of my dress, her breathing trembling in fear. I was much better. "This has never happened before. Leave now and no one has to get hurt." The general's voice rang out strong and firm in the dark, deserted street, like he was used to these kinds of situations and knew how to handle them. He honestly probably was, but our ears were only met with a dark, inhuman chuckle. "You're outnumbered, Wolf." A voice that sounded more animal than anything sneered from the dark mass barely a few yards in front of us. and caused the one behind to snicker. A terrifying chill ran down my spine. It was hard to figure out that Terif was like any normal shifter, but I was still surprised that the whatever in front of us made the connection so quickly. There's more of us. In the alleys. You should be the one afraid of getting hurt. I was surprised at the laughter that suddenly escaped the large wolf, born standing protectively in front of me. The first and only time I had ever heard him laugh, and it was terrifying. I was sure who to be afraid of more. The two masses starting to slowly circle around us, or the large wolf trembling unnaturally in front of me. But Terif wouldn't hurt us. I was almost positive. I fear nothing. The voice that left the general's lips was not one I had heard before, and not one I ever wanted to hear again. It was gruff, dark, and sounded for too alien to be anything remotely human. I gasped and took a staggering step back. Bringing May with me. We don't want to fight you. Wolf, we only want the females. Give them to us, and you can walk away unscathed. My chest clenched tightly at the cloaked figure's statement, and May's frightened whimpering behind me didn't help the fear either. They wanted us. I thought they would just take our purses and belongings and leave, not take us. May clung tighter to me as that dark, inhuman growl filled the deserted street once again. That won't be happening. Terif's voice was strained, hard, and sounded like he was having a hard time speaking past a pair of very sharp canines. My breath caught in my throat when he suddenly turned to glance at me, when a pair of eyes so inhuman they glowed against the darkness locked on mine. I had seen him like this before, the very first time we had ever met, but I had gotten so used to the almost human version of him that I wasn't sure how to handle what was happening. He held my gaze for a moment, his features slowly distorting in a grotesque manner as he began to shift into the wolf his kind were so proud of. Go! That one word passed his lips before he suddenly jumped over us, his large body shifting in mid-air and attacking the dark mass behind us, the one who had gotten so close he was barely a foot away from grabbing a hold of May. She screamed. I gasped, and blood splattered the cobblestone at our feet. Run. I shouted at her and gripped tightly onto her hand before pulling her towards the alley at our side. I didn't care where we were going at that point, as long as we got away from the carnage and gore happening behind us. I made the mistake of glancing back over my shoulder at Terif, and watched miserably as 5 more dark bodies fell from the roofs of the surrounding buildings. 5 more bodies Terif would have to fight. The thought made my steps falter. He couldn't possibly take on all those me alone. He would die. What are you doing? May screamed as she clung tightly onto my arm and tried to viciously drag me down the dark alley. Terif. He can't possibly, he told us to go. You heard him. He can handle himself a lot better than we can. She was right. I knew she was. I just didn't want to leave him all alone and defenseless. The king wouldn't have left him. He probably would have stood at his side and fought bravely with him. I knew he would. Running would make me a coward. A heartless coward. Emrie, please. They gasped, dreadful tears streaming down her face in waterfalls as she continued to pull on my arm. My heart broke at the look on her face, at the desperation in her hazel eye. She would die too if I went back to help him. We all would. Let's go, I whispered miserably before grabbing her hand again and running down the small street. But it was too late. My internal debate took too long, and I had slammed face first into the dark, cloaked figure that appeared out of nowhere. I staggered backwards with a pained gasp, but the tight, painful grip that suddenly wrapped around my upper arms wouldn't let me go very far. Along, dark, howl sounded far behind us. May go. I shouted at her as I tried to kick desperately at our attacker, but my dress skirts and the dark cloak the man wore made it ridiculously hard. May go. The cloaked man mocked in a ridiculously high voice as his grip on me tightened, his fingers like talons as they sank into my skin. He laughed, the hood of the cloak hiding what I was sure was a grotesque, inhuman face. I screamed, like anyone passing by would stop to help two defenseless girls getting, whatever the hell was happening to us, kidnapped. I didn't even care. I screamed too. But when I looked over my shoulder at her, it was only because a different cloaked figure had grabbed her. The panic swirled like an ugly storm inside my chest. This could not be happening. The lower kingdom was always a safe place. May and I walked these streets 1,000 times by ourselves without a problem. And now, when I actually had a guard, we were being taken. I wonder how Eirik would react to that. Would he even care? Did it really matter? Why in the world was I worried about that right then? Scream. Scream. All you want. The hoarse, inhuman voice of the man seemed to sing as he lifted me into the air and shook me hard. No one will help you, and all you will accomplish is annoying the fuck out of me, Terif. I screamed into the cold night air anyways. Despite the obvious threat in our attacker's voice, the howl from before shook through the silence of the night. But the general was nowhere to be seen. The cloaked figure hissed, the noise sounding more reptilian than anything, as a pair of yellow, green eyes in the shape of 𝐊𝐿𝐼𝐻 snake flashed in the darkness. Little wolf bitch. He hissed and shook me so hard my head snapped back. I groaned in pain. I'll give you a reason to scream. He snarled and shook me again in that same vicious way, but that time the back of my head slammed into the brick wall behind me. I never got the chance to scream again.